My greedy brother tried to steal my worthless cabin. It sold for $30 million, and he got nothing. After my father's funeral, my mother and my older brother, David, made it immediately clear that I was no longer welcome in the family home. They gathered in the living room, ostensibly to discuss future arrangements, but their true intention was to execute a swift, hostile eviction. "You have to move out of the old wooden house you inherited, Sarah," my mother stated, her voice devoid of any warmth. "It's about time you stopped being a burden and became independent." David quickly backed her up, his tone condescending and urgent. "Only you inherited that cabin, but it's a massive financial burden. You must sell it and give the money to me so I can double the investment. It's the only path for you to achieve stability." They were operating under the delusion that the small, dilapidated wooden cottage was worthless, the very thing my father had deliberately left me, and that I was simply too naive to know its actual value. They didn't know the truth. That cottage was worth 10 times more than all their combined cash inheritance. I am Sarah, 28 years old. I am a freelance software engineer. I earn more than enough to sustain a comfortable life, but my mother and David, with their old-fashioned perspectives, refused to acknowledge my profession. They saw my remote work as nothing more than something online, a useless hobby, a way to avoid real responsibilities. My father, a former civil engineer, had left David a substantial amount of cash and company stocks. My inheritance, conversely, was just the coastal wooden cottage the family used for summer retreats. My mother, blinded by her favoritism for David, saw the cottage as a paltry, insignificant item. She often commented that I was lucky Dad left me anything at all. David, 35, a perpetual underachiever whose high-end sports store was hemorrhaging money, saw my inheritance as his last lifeline. He believed he could pressure me into selling the cabin for a pittance to pay off his mounting debts. The pressure started immediately, growing more intense each day following the funeral. David would call me multiple times a day, demanding an answer. "Sarah, you have to sell immediately. The property taxes alone are exorbitant, and Mom can't afford to cover your expenses anymore. Just sign the transfer papers to me, and I'll handle the sale. I'll throw you a small portion, maybe enough for a month's rent, as support." I kept my composure, remembering my father's quiet instructions. I knew I couldn't reveal the secret yet. I observed David. Beneath his aggressive demands, I could see deep anxiety. "I'm not selling, David," I finally responded. His face contorted in disbelief. "What did you say? Are you blind? That house is barely standing. It needs thousands in repairs. You don't have the money to fix it. This is your only chance to monetize that useless piece of land without incurring tax debt." I had to be vague and noncommittal. "You're right, David. It needs work. But it was Dad's legacy. I want to keep it. I'll handle all costs myself." This declaration infuriated my mother, who stepped in to support her favorite son. She was accustomed to my compliance and silence. "Sarah, are you deliberately trying to sabotage your brother? David is trying to help you. He is the only one in this family with the financial acumen to invest properly. You just sit at home typing. You will end up with nothing." David believed he was the rightful heir, constantly reminding me that he was the real breadwinner, while my remote work was just some sort of shady business or a weird religion. I decided to keep my silence and let them continue their assumptions. I needed to wait for the perfect moment. The passive-aggressive manipulation quickly turned into a direct confrontation. David, frustrated by my refusal, sent me a hostile email, followed by a sudden visit. "We have made a decision," David announced, walking into my room with my mother trailing behind him. "Mine, William, and I are moving back in with Mom. You have to move out. Mom says this house should be occupied by those who contribute to the family, not a burden like you." The sheer audacity was astounding. "Mom, are you really kicking me out of my home? I have lived here and covered the majority of the household expenses for the past year. I've been transferring a substantial, stable income into the joint account for your bills and shopping," I reminded her, keeping my voice firm. David laughed bitterly. "That small amount was just maintenance fee, Sarah. You don't contribute. Your online job is useless. I am the family's future." I decided that the time for subtle hints was over. It was time for phase 1 of my long-term plan, mirroring how Carrie dealt with her toxic family by eliminating their financial safety net. Fine, I will leave. But you and David will be solely responsible for all living expenses from now on. I will be withdrawing my contributions, including the personal funds Dad asked me to manage before he passed. David was overconfident. Go ahead, Sarah. I work for a solid company. I can easily afford it. Mom, I told you, this girl is just a weight dragging us down. I didn't waste time arguing further. I quietly accessed the shared bank account and the separate account my father had allowed me access to for managing his expenses, and swiftly transferred all the money I had contributed, plus the personal savings I was managing, into my own private and secured account. I also immediately canceled the supplementary credit card my mother used, knowing full well she would not notice until the next shopping spree. The financial burden of the large family home now rested entirely on David, who believed he was financially sound. I packed the essentials. As I left, my mother and David smiled, relieved to be rid of the parasite. I left them in their ignorance, knowing the clock was ticking until the utilities and luxury purchases stopped. I moved into a small, well-furnished apartment nearby, perfect for concentrating on my freelance work. I accepted 2 major contracts, dedicating myself fully to my profession, while the dominoes I had set up at home began to fall. I knew David and Mom's spending habits, reckless and completely detached from reality. The first frantic call came exactly 2 weeks later. It was Mom, her voice shrill and confused. Sarah, my credit card is suddenly blocked. I tried to buy the new designer scarf I wanted, and it was declined. The household bills are also piling up. What is going on? Did you do something? I maintained a feigned calmness. I have no idea, Mom. You need to ask David. He's the breadwinner, remember? Perhaps he's restructuring the family finances now that I'm gone. She started complaining bitterly about the unexpected expenses, about how David was suddenly stressed and short-tempered. She was used to spending without consequence. I offered zero sympathy, merely suggesting she review her exorbitant spending habits. You've been accustomed to spending without thinking for too long, Mom. Things change, I said, before hanging up. A few days later, David called. His voice was no longer arrogant. It was strained and on the verge of panic. David, I need cash immediately. The water and electricity have been shut off, and Mom is having a meltdown. I don't know what to do. How is your business doing, David? And the solid company you work for? I pressed him. David hesitated, a long, agonizing silence on the line. That company? I was laid off, Sarah. Actually, it happened months ago, before I moved back home for the pretense of stabilizing the family business. My suspicion was confirmed. He was financially ruined and had returned home purely to exploit my father's pension and any leftover cash, believing I was the only one with no real income. Why didn't you tell me the truth, David? And why on earth would you expect me to help you after you and Mom insulted me, called me a parasite, and forced me out of my home? I genuinely thought you had no income, he stammered, shame mingling with desperation. I thought you were just playing games online. I'm begging you, Sarah. We have to sell that cottage right now. I need the money just to cover basic necessities. He pleaded relentlessly, even handing the phone to my mother, who tried to play the role of the suffering victim. You cannot abandon your poor mother. Your brother made mistakes, yes, but you are the daughter. You have a responsibility to support us. This was the opening I needed to set the final confrontation. There is no need to sell the cabin, David. It's already been sold. The silence that followed was deafening. Then David exploded, his voice cracking with rage. "What? You sold it already? To whom? You can't sell without my consent. How much did you get? You must split it with me. I'm your brother. I deserve half." I refused to engage in a shouting match. "I have no obligation to share anything with you. The land was legally mine, and I sold it." His threats and curses escalated. "If you don't give me the money, I will expose you. I will tell everyone you are an ungrateful child who stole her inheritance and left her family to starve. You are welcome to try, David. But before you speak to anyone, meet me and the family lawyer tomorrow. I have a major surprise for you and Mom." I hung up, feeling a powerful rush of cold satisfaction. Their fear and greed were finally exposed. They had banked everything on their assumption of my financial worthlessness and their supposed superiority. Now, they were about to learn the real value of the worthless item I inherited. I prepared myself for the final scene of the confrontation.
The next day, David and my mother arrived at the lawyer's office, looking frantic and disheveled. They'd obviously spent the night arguing. My mother immediately appealed to emotion. "Sarah, please, your brother is going to lose everything. We are your family. Whatever you got for that house, you have to help us." I exchanged a knowing glance with Mr. Davis, the family lawyer. David bypassed his mother's pleas and demanded the numbers. "Sarah, stop playing games. How much did you get for the cottage? $100,000? $200,000? I will take the entire amount. I needed to save my company." I maintained my steady gaze. "The cabin and the land were sold for $30 million, I announced, allowing the weight of the number to settle in the room. My mother gasped, sinking back into her chair. David stood frozen, his face going pale. "No, it's impossible. That old shack? You are lying." Mr. Davis intervened, confirming the truth. "Madam, Mr. David, the land that Sarah inherited was not merely a coastal property. It sits directly above a vast mineral deposit. Your father had secretly negotiated with a major mining corporation before his death, under the strict condition that the information remain confidential until the sales contract was finalized 6 months after the will was read. My father knew exactly what he was doing. He had given David the liquid assets he desperately wanted to prove his supposed business prowess, and he had given me the single most valuable, illiquid asset, knowing I would cherish and protect it, securing my future. David completely lost control. Dad couldn't do this. It should have been mine. I'm the son. I struggled so hard with my business. Dad gave you cash, David. I responded, my voice firm, and you proved you were unworthy of it. He gave me a sentimental asset that you always scorned, but it was the only asset he trusted me to keep. My mother started weeping hysterically, turning to the lawyer. "Mr. Davis, there must be a way. We are her mother and brother. She has to share some of that money." The lawyer shook his head. "Your father's will, along with the sales contract, established a trust fund in Sarah's name for the entire $30 million. The terms clearly state the funds are for Sarah's use and reasonable expenses only. There are no provisions for sharing with other family members, especially given that Mr. David had already received his full inheritance." David lunged at me, grabbing my collar in a blind fury. "You manipulative liar. You knew this all along and said nothing. I will sue you. I will prove that cottage belongs to me." I forcefully pushed his hand away. "You chose to cut me out of your lives. I have no obligation to share any information with the people who called me a parasite and forced me out of my home." The atmosphere was toxic. David turned on my mother. "Mom, why didn't you keep an eye on her? You didn't do anything." Mom retaliated. "How dare you blame me? You lied about having a stable job. You were unemployed before you moved back in." I seized the moment of chaos. "David, you claim you need money to save your company and cover household bills. How much did you contribute to Mom's living expenses in the past 3 months? Show me the receipts. If you can prove you paid her necessary expenses, I will consider covering those costs. David was rendered completely speechless. He had no receipts because he had been relying entirely on the funds I had managed and the money I had contributed. He was trapped in his own web of lies.
David realized he had been cornered. The rage subsided, replaced by desperate pleading. "Sarah, please, just a fraction of it. I'm going to lose my house. I can't live like this." "You received more than you deserved from Dad, David. You squandered it recklessly. Now you must face the consequences of your own choices, just like I faced mine when I built my career from nothing." Mr. Davis then delivered the final crushing blow. If Mr. David attempts to contest the will or sue Sarah, all his current creditors will be notified about the $30 million transaction. They will not believe he has no access to the money and will aggressively pursue his existing debts immediately. David knew he was financially ruined and possibly facing serious legal ramifications. He had been completely outmaneuvered. He stumbled out of the office with my mother, both defeated. Their looks were a mixture of hatred and absolute failure. Over the next few months, the inevitable happened. David was forced to sell his luxury house to cover his overwhelming debt. My mother, completely reliant on David's now non-existent income and my canceled credit card allowance, had to significantly downgrade her lifestyle. She had to move into a tiny one-bedroom apartment and take a degrading part-time job to survive. She still sent me occasional emails blaming me for her situation and labeling me as cold, but I ignored them entirely. I used the money from the trust fund wisely, expanding my software company and investing in real estate, finding solace in the financial freedom and the peace of mind. I cut off all contact with David and my mother. I found out through the grapevine that David and Mom were forced to live together, constantly fighting over money and blaming each other for their misfortune. They were reaping the consequences of their relentless greed and contempt. My father's will was a meticulously crafted judgment. He didn't just leave me a fortune. He left me a perfect mechanism for removing the toxicity from my life. Now I can live a life of prosperity and peace, free from the crushing weight of their entitlement.